Hello everyone and welcome on back to the channel. So I have just completed the next story update for Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, known as What Lies Beneath. And it was certainly an update. This is going to be a little bit more of a review of the update in its totality, looking at the positives, the negatives, the expectations, and overall the replayability of this patch and what it might mean for future updates. I'm gonna first start with the map. For this update, we go to a new region in the Jade Sea, I almost said Crystal Desert, known as Delve. I gotta say, the map is absolutely stunning. The environment art, the team that puts together the maps, all the assets look so phenomenal and stunning. The skybox is set during like dusk. The sun is either like, I think it's sunset. It is just so beautiful when you're outside. It looks absolutely phenomenal. They do not miss in that department at all. On top of this, the new music, McLean's Emer is just, it's so good. Has such a strong grasp on End of Dragons and also the area in terms of composing for these regions, and it is just more tracks added to an already fantastic soundtrack for End of Dragons. Now this map for Delve does not have any hearts, which was the very first thing that I noticed. It is an entirely meta-focused map. And the meta currently, because it's only half of the map, is very quick and easy, and it seems to have a little bit of a limit to how much you can actually farm it. And the meta starts right away. You gather at the very start, and in a similar sense to Dragon's End and Dragon's Stand, you go down 2 lanes, you capture the points, and those events have the same exact events, and there's not a whole lot of interest. It's very short and sweet, and it gets you to the end. But of course, to remind you, this is currently half of the map because we have an extension to the map coming with the next story update. On top of the map mechanics, we also have these dynamic events, which are called ambushes. And spoilers, they're Oni ambushes. What ambush? What in the fuck? Are we gonna die? Wait, I am thoroughly intrigued by this. What are these creatures? Oh, they look terrible. I love them. They have like perma. Oh my god. Wait, is there like an achievement to survive this? Oh my god. Stop it. Is there like an achievement to survive this? I mean, the deadliest thing on 2 legs. This was the very first time in a long time, I should say. So it's not technically the very first time, but it's been quite a while for me as a player venturing off into a map and feeling a slight tinge of terror or pressure or a sense of unexpected, of like, oh, am I going to die if I go around this corner? Usually that doesn't happen. However, in Delve, you can be ambushed by a group of Oni, and these Oni are lethal. They're elite level Oni. They apply like 25 stacks of vulnerability, 20 bleeds, and their strikes themselves are really, really strong. They don't have a lot of health, so you can fight them and you can win, but you have to have really good reaction time. It would also help if you have others around you, but I was caught out by myself for the very first time. I did not know what was happening, and I was just demolished. I really want to hone in on that aspect because I thought it was probably one of the best additions to this map. Now let's move on to the negatives, what I have to say about the map, and once again, take this with a grain of salt. So, first negative is that the map is a meta map. Which, it's kind of like astrology. It's like, this is both a positive, but can also be a negative. Because it has been such a long time since we've received End of Dragons content. It's been about a year. I would not have minded if this map was a bit more of a Grothmar Valley-esque map, where you have more story, it's more about world building, you can talk to a bunch of NPCs, you can go around and leisurely explore, hear NPCs talk, maybe even have a couple side quests, because End of Dragons was a little light, in my opinion, on really exploring the native people of Cantha, of exploring the Canthans and all of their idiosyncrasies. However, This is a meta map. And with that being a meta map, you really can't take it at your own pace. You have to follow the herd of players, you have to follow the events, and if you fall behind, you sometimes pick up on some NPCs talking, but the pace of the map really pushes you forward, and there's not a whole lot of room for exploration and finding little things and little corners and pockets. On top of this, the meta is a bit uninteresting because it is at the halfway point. And remember, this is the halfway point. So some people might give it a little bit of leeway and a little bit of credit. If this is the halfway point and I'm still not interested, am I really gonna want to finish the whole entire thing? Like, the ending has to be so incredible for me to really feel like this is going to be a map that I'm going to farm and play continuously. And it doesn't matter, partially, if there is going to be an expansion to this meta, what we get should be of a high enough quality to keep us interested. And people have pointed out Drizzlewood Coast. That map meta was the map was a meta map. And the halfway point was a really cinematic and interesting boss fight that had multiple elements to it. This, on the other hand, when you get to the final part of the halfway point currently, is just uninteresting. 3 bosses, they have very uninteresting mechanics. They're basically sponges. Their attack pattern is very simple. All it really changes is their visual representation because the Oni takes on different forms, and that's about it. With that being said, let's move on to another aspect of this map that I find to be a little bit of a pain point, and that is the map mechanic. Yes, this map has an entire mechanic dedicated to itself, which is known as haze. The map mechanic of haze is, in my opinion, brutally annoying. When I first got into it, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. It's like you gotta make sure that you have your filtration system and that you're not succumbing to the toxin and the haze effects. However, it becomes so annoying after a few runs because you start to forget about it, because this map is one of the only maps that's ever really forced you to interact with a station before you progress to another zone, and then interact with the station before you progress, and then station before you progress. It's just this repetitive feature that seems redundant. Also, the cost, you have to go up to a merchant and it says like, cost 0 copper. And if it's costing 0 copper, why is it even a thing? Like, it's just annoying. And it's especially annoying if you are in the middle of a boss fight or an event to push it, and you run out of your filtration system, and after, the first couple of hits of the haze, you're not really noticing it, it's not too bad, but once you get up to 5 or 6 stacks, it hits like a truck. You start to go down, you get a bunch of conditions applied to you, it's just annoying. And another annoying factor about this haze mechanic is that it goes to a certain amount of stack. Once that 60 seconds is up, typically in Guild Wars 2, the entire effect will remove itself. No. The effect will just reduce by 1. So, if you have up to 10 stacks, that's like 10 minutes of haze effect on your character while you're in that map. Okay, we might as well talk about it right now. There's no mastery with this update, and people have often mentioned, because this haze mechanic is tied to the Jade bot, I don't know why this wasn't just a Jade bot mastery. And it also requires you to have a Jade bot and to get battery charges to purchase the haze filter. So if you don't have a Jade bot on your character, you can't play this map. And I have 30 characters, so some of my characters don't have them. I don't like it when you have to stop what you're doing to interact with what feels like a redundant mechanic. I have the same criticisms for the Jade battery, where you have to get a battery to open up the Jade Tech chests in core End of Dragons. I thought that was terrible design in terms of an exploration front, and also in terms of a replayability, because if you have multiple characters, not every character is going to have a Jade bot. And yeah, this is the same vein where it just feels redundant. You have to stop what you're doing to interact with a completely useless mechanic that has no real effect in terms of like, oh, that was mechanically interesting, or oh, it cost me certain resources, I have to go farm that. It's just, stop what you're doing, stop playing our game, and then go and interact with this thing momentarily. I think it is genuinely bad. Like, moving on from the map, let's talk about the story, because we've gotten into that map for a hot minute. This story, start with the positives, what I really enjoyed. Finally, we're getting into some new territory. I'm just super happy that we're going into something new, that we're experiencing something fresh and groovy, and it's just really nice to move away from season 1, just because it's been something that most players who are veterans have experienced before. This pushing back into End of Dragons, we get to explore more characters from End of Dragons. I also really loved the limited cast that we had for this update. We were really focusing on Goric, Rama, and Yao, and Chilmu popped up. Some people would say he was a pretty major character in this patch. I didn't really get the sense that he was a major character in any way. He kind of felt like a side supporting character, but Chilmu is here. And I'm just so happy that Yao is finally getting more screen time. I find them to be very refreshing from a character. They tell it straight, and they call people out if they have a moment of hypocrisy, because as a player, as a human, if you kind of remember the story, some characters will say something and you're like, well, that's hypocritical. And Yao points it out. Yao's like, well, Rama, Minister Lee, don't get on me for being associated with Chilmu, okay? Don't throw stones in glass houses, okay? Moving on from the protagonists, let's talk about the antagonist. The enemy itself is refreshing. The enemy is this haze, this Oni, this demonic energy, which many people are saying it's like KXI, you know, relating into some demon stuff. And now we get to go into something a bit more dark and creepy. Now I want to talk about the cons. For whatever I liked about this story, I do think that there are some issues in terms of the way it was delivered and or expectations when going into this new era of Guild Wars 2 content releases. First, and culminating issue that I have with this update is the length. It's incredibly short. This is a short story. It took me about 2 hours, I would say, and that's while I was streaming, so I took breaks. We had ad breaks. I was talking with chat. I was getting distracted. People were asking me questions. I'd say it took me a little over 2 hours. Friends that I have who were not streaming and were just focused on the story completed it within an hour. And some people who were playing the story and did the meta simultaneously, they did it about in an hour and a half. Overall, that is really short for a Living World update. If you compare it to a Living World update. I guess we can't say that because it's not a Living World update, but it's secretly a Living World update because it follows the exact same formula of story delivery. And it was not what I was expecting, considering that we haven't had End of Dragons content for over a year. I understand that we had to do season 1, and that is content, there is newness to it, but was season 1 entirely new? Absolutely not. And even if this was considered to be a living world, this wouldn't even live up to living world standards, in my opinion. This was incredibly short. When you look at something like Grothmar Valley, the prologue Bound by Blood, and a couple of the Icebrood Saga updates, those were meaty. Grothmar Valley took me like 3 hours while I was playing by myself. And there were cinematics, there were side moments to get into, there were characters that you could talk to. There was just multiple story steps, story instances, so much to do. This felt like 1/10 of the prologue Bound by Blood. If this is going to be representative of other quarterly updates, I'm a little concerned just because it is very, very, very bare bones. And there could have been other things added to this which would have alleviated that, but we'll get into that in but a moment. Moving on to another element of the story is the map. The map doesn't offer any side quests or achievements to really flesh out its limited runtime. We've had elements in Arborstone after End of Dragons completes. You can go and talk to some NPCs and get some side quests to go and do, which flesh out the story, which flesh out those characters. We don't get any of that in this update, which I'm really sad to see. I feel like they could have better utilized that, particularly in the quarry base camp, because there are quite a few NPCs around just doing nothing. And yeah, it's just like, there's nothing else to do that really expands your story experience with this update. The element that I find to be a little bit of a criticism is the show don't tell rule of storytelling. Yao, and this is in connection to Chilmu, Yao tells us a lot about Chilmu as a character, but we don't really see Chilmu be that, if that makes sense, which is probably a fault of End of Dragons. Yao talks a lot about what Cholmu was like before Gyaladelv, but we never really got a lot of time with Cholmu. We didn't get a lot of events with Cholmu. So from my perspective, I didn't have like a solidified expectation of who this character was. But then going into Gyaladelv and with all this mental manipulation and haze effect, there's a lot of talk about Cholmu being paranoid and like on edge, and people aren't really taking him seriously anymore, even though he's like the leader, but he finds himself to be serious. It's just a lot of telling us who Cholmu is without really backing it up, other than he's currently paranoid. That is fulfilled. Well, I mean, it's a mix of like, this could have been delivered a little bit better, but it's not like terrible. I do like that we got something of it. Another element that I'm getting sick and tired of is the showing your dead friends card. At the end of this story instance, we have yet another moment where the commander has to face the friends that have died in the past. You have to encounter your mentors from Claw Island. If you haven't gotten to Claw Island, you find Traherne, Air, and then Almora Soulkeeper, which I find to be very weird in terms of like Almora would show up as one character that we were like so gut-wrenched and heartbroken over. I mean, we've had this trope pop up in Heart of Thorns. We had it in Path of Fire when we went and were in the spirit realm and we died. It popped up in Living World Season 4 when Air came back from the mists with Snaf. Icebrood Saga, I think we kind of probably had a moment of it. And then in End of Dragons, we also had a moment where when we were in the Harvest Temple at the final meta event, our dead friends were talking to us. Every single expansion, every single release, we are just revisiting dead characters. Why? Why? Let the dead be dead in a weird way. And we understand, especially in the story canonically, the Mistsar thing, we've seen dead people come back. The commander would be like, oh my gosh, my dead friends, we don't know what the afterlife is. We can never see them until we're dead. We've seen them fully come back and like talk to them, and we have revenants. So like, it's a little weird. It's not as satisfying anymore. It's an old hat. It just keeps being reutilized. And when you finish a 10-year storyline, you should take the opportunity to do something new and to really kind of move past the equations and tropes that you always utilize to really bring something fresh. And the fact that I noticed it is a little concerning, because I'm usually oblivious. I'm usually just like, oh yeah, it's so good, I love it, oh my god, like I really enjoyed it, and people would be like, oh yeah, we've done this before, and I was like, oh, I didn't notice that, but I noticed this, and I think a lot of people noticed it when I was watching some other people's streams. People are starting to notice this, like, oh yay, we get to have this same experience of talking to our dead friends. Now let's talk about replayability, our final point of this update. Overall, I can sum up replayability in one word: meh. The map of meta event, I believe, has a limit to how many key cards you can use per day. So already that is a hard cap on how farmable this map meta event is, which for it being the newest update is kind of wild. You would think that you'd want players to stay in that map and to experience it over and over again because it's the fresh content, it's the newest content. But then again, it's not like overly restricting. It's just the fact that there is a hard limit to it is kind of strange. On top of this, there is no strike mission, and there is no fractal. We did get confirmation that there will be a fractal coming next patch. However, the fact that we are not getting a strike mission every single story update, especially at the end of this story, where it was the perfect opportunity to have a strike mission. The stage was set, there was music, there was unique attacks, there were mechanics involved with this end boss in this story update. The fact that there isn't a strike mission is wild. It's wild to me. I don't even need a challenge mode. I just need something that we can replay in terms of the core pillars of Guild Wars 2. I think I'm gonna wrap this up because this has been a long review. I think there are a few positives within this patch in terms of the newness, in terms of the music, the environment, the ambush events, a little bit of lethality within an open world event. The story, we're actually getting more character development for certain characters within End of Dragons. I absolutely love that. I'm just very underwhelmed, slightly underwhelmed by the amount of content that we got, and in some areas the quality of content that we got. So what would I rank this out of 10? I'd probably give it a 6.5 out of 10. I am giving it a little bit of leeway as this is kind of a transition period into this new format, and of course they were just hot off the heels of season 1, which was new content, but for this patch, you know, we were kind of going up and up, and I feel like we went down a little bit. There's a part of me that is still thinking that the next expansion is going to take place in Cantha. Due to the pacing of this update and the next one, it seems that we're going to be getting an expansion this year. I can't see us leaving Cantha just yet, considering all of the Raisu Palace stuff, and the Kirin Peaks, and the rest of Xingje Island, and the Turtle Highlands. There's so much left to Cantha that last night I was like, we might not be leaving Cantha next expansion. So I want to ask you, how would you feel if next expansion we still were in Cantha, but we were no longer dealing with the dragon storyline, we were no longer dealing with Oreen, and it really was more of a Cantha-focused expansion? I like to say End of Dragons was more so an expansion about the dragons set in Cantha, not an expansion about Cantha. So with that, how would you feel about the next expansion still persisting in Cantha? Thank you all so very much. Comment down below, subscribe, comment, share, and if you'd like to catch me over on Twitch, I stream there almost every other day. Usually on the weekends, my schedules have been changing, but I hope to catch you live. So I will see you all later. Bye, everyone. Mwah.